Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Piyush and this is video number 5 in the series Azure DevOps Zero to Hero. In this video, we'll be looking mostly into Azure DevOps release pipeline, and this is a continuation to the previous video. So we'll be using the same project of YouTube clone in this demo as well. And let's have a look at the agenda. All right, so I am in my GitHub repository, Azure DevOps Zero to Hero. You should already have the link. If not, it's there in the comment section and in the description as well. So as I've mentioned, this is a continuation to the previous video and we'll be using the same project of YouTube clone. And in this, we'll be doing the automated deployment with multi-stage release pipeline. So we'll create the separate stage for dev environment and for prod. We will look into the continuous deployment triggers and deployment slots to enable blue-green deployment. This is a deployment strategy. We'll talk a little about it and then we'll see how it works actually in Azure DevOps. We'll also look into deployment gates such as query work item and approval before the prod deployment. And finally, we'll create a pull request to test the entire CI/CD process from scratch using build and release pipeline. And with that being said, let's start the demo. So I am in my Azure DevOps project. You should have the link. And this is the project that we created for the previous video and we'll continue on that. So I'll go to the pipeline and release pipeline from here. Now there is no pipeline that has been created yet. So I'll click over here which says new pipeline to create a new pipeline. So this is a little different than the build pipeline that we saw because it does not have the YAML option. There is only the GUI based pipeline that we can configure. So that is the reason most of the organization prefer doing the CI/CD in just with the build pipeline, and they don't use this one because it don't give you the flexibility of managing pipeline as a code. But some of them use it because it comes with a few additional features such as quality gates, approval, and all those things. And you don't have to explicitly write the logic for it because it comes with release pipeline out of the box. So it totally depends on your requirements, but as part of this course, we'll be looking into each and everything so that you get to know how it works. The same way, when you click on new pipeline, this screen will appear, which will ask you to either select a template or start with an empty job. We can start with a template, which is Azure App Service Deployment. Click over here, or you can search any other template if you are using a different tech stack. So let's call this stage a different name. Instead of the default one, we'll call it dev deployment. Close it. And over here, you see this particular GUI. The first one is artifact, and then we have stages. So let's look into the artifact first. Artifacts is nothing but the builds that it requires from either from the upstream system or from the artifact repository. Artifact repository will be looking into the later video, but over here we'll be using the build artifact that was generated from the build pipeline itself. So to do that, click over here, add an artifact, and select the source type as Azure build because this is our source where our build artifact resides. Project is same, YouTube clone, and then click on the drop down and select YouTube clone. Okay, and keep everything as default because we'll be picking the default version. If you need to deploy any particular version, that you can select that as well. Like go over here, specific version, and just mention the version details. But for now, let's just pick the latest version and hit add. So now this will add the artifact step over here. And if you see, there is a little icon over here with the thunder sign, and this represent continuous deployment trigger. So if you click on that, you can now set the CD trigger. So whenever there is a new build available, it should trigger the CD pipeline, right? So you can enable it, but just like doing this, and you can specify the branch on which it is available. So if you select this and select the option, the builds pipeline default branch, you can add multiple branch as well, but this will just work fine for us. Then there is a pull request trigger. It says enabling this will create a release every time a selected artifact is available as part of a pull request workflow. Right. So for now, let's just keep it over here. Whenever a new build is created, just close it. So now our first step is completed. There is an option to set a schedule as well. Like if you want to trigger the continuous deployment at a particular time at a particular day, you can select this and you can enable this option and select the time as per your preference. But for now, we'll be just using the first trigger, which is continuous deployment. So over here as well, if you see in the stage, it has some pre-deployment conditions and some post-deployment conditions. So let's look into the pre-deployment conditions first. So it has a trigger. So trigger will be auto trigger, like after the release, or it could be manual, like you just have to click deploy every time you want to trigger this stage. So let's just use this one after trigger, and then artifact filter. If you add this, if you enable this, you can add the filter over here, like which branch you want to run on, like main branch, and that should be good. This is what we need. Okay, or you can set the schedule, you can set the pull request deployment and pre-deployment approval. We'll add that into the prod deployment, but not for the test deployment, right? I'll show you how it works. And then we also have something called as quality gates. So if you enable this feature, it will show you few options like the delay between the evaluation. So before that, let's set a deployment gate over here. Click on add, and there are few options that you can check. So let's say query work item. Okay. So let's select the query, go to shared query. I don't have any queries created. Okay, so I'll go to this project YouTube clone. Okay, and go to boards. I don't have any work item created for this board and there are no queries at all. So I'll just quickly create a work item. Let's create a task and give it a name, quality gate check, right? So let's keep it in to do state, save, and maybe change it to doing, save. Now let's go to queries and create a new query. Let's add the query filter priority and priority equal to 1. Okay, and let's remove the other filters. So this should be good. And then save queries and make sure, like, let's give it a name, P1 tasks. Let's call it that. And make sure you save it in shared query so that it has access to it. Click OK. Okay, and let's see if it is showing any results. If you go to chart or result, there is nothing because we don't have any P1 work item. So let's go back to work item and go to this task and change the priority from P2. It's over here. The default priority is P2. So change it to P1. Okay, hit save. And now let's go back to queries again and shared queries, this one. And now let's see, now it is showing one item in result and in chart it is not showing anything because we have to create the chart for it. So if we do that and let's say select group by work item type and save chart, now it is showing one item. Okay, so now we have the result. Now let's go back to our release pipeline and select the query again. Okay, maybe I'll just close it and open it again so that it will refresh. Click over here again. Okay, so now let's create the deployment gates again. Query work item, go down, display name query work item and select the query. Expand this and this query is now available over here. This is the one that we have created in this particular project. It says upper threshold. That means the maximum number of matching work items from the query it could take into account. So let's keep it 2 for now. Go to advanced, lower threshold, 0 is fine, and that should be good. Then deployment queue settings, maximum number of parallel deployment. That means if we have multi stages and if it could run in parallel. So let's keep it 1 for now, and subsequent releases should be deploy all in sequence or deploy latest and cancel the other. You can select as per your preference, right? So we have added a deployment gate over here, right? Which is query work item. There are other options from which you can select. For example, you want to trigger any REST API, or there are other options that we saw. You want to invoke a REST API or invoke a Azure function, check Azure policy compliance, or query Azure monitor alerts. So you can use any of those as well, right? Earlier, the query was not visible over here because I didn't have any matching bugs available that could match the query, and the query was not created. Okay, so that's it. You can click close. Now let's add the job and task to it. Click on that. Now this is similar to the classic UI of build pipeline. Let's select Azure subscription from the dropdown. And this is again the service connection that we are talking about. Then type is web app on Linux, and app service name. This is the app service that we created. Okay, this one. Now let's leave the startup command as blank because it will take care of it. So this is the deployment, and then run on agent. Let's use the same agent, Azure pipeline. Like this is the default agent, and Ubuntu latest, the one that we used for our build pipeline. All right. And yeah, it will download the artifact by default from the previous stage and go to this section now. Now, this section has similar details like connection type, Azure Resource Manager, WebEx on Linux. So this inherited from the previous stage. Now there is an option over here which says deploy to slots or app service environment. If you remember, while creating the build pipeline, I told you that I'm going to explain it to you when we reach there. So now's the time I'm explaining it to you. Deploy to slots, that means Azure App Service provide a functionality of slot. So it create an identical environment of your actual environment, and you can make your changes in that environment. So if you click on that, right, it will ask you where is your staging slot or dev slot available. So if you select on that, select the resource group and slot. Currently, I did not created any slot. Let's go to our Azure portal and create the slot first. So here I am in my Azure portal. And on the left side, you will see an option under deployment. It says deployment slots. Click on that. Okay, now it says there is only one deployment slot, which is the default one and which is running your production workload. Right. So let's click over here, add slot, and I will add it. I'll give it a name staging. Now, if we deploy the website to the staging slot, it will be accessible over this URL. Now you see it has appended -staging along with the DNS. And our main website will be available on techtutorialswithpiyush.azurewebsite.net. So there is a separate domain created for you for just your staging environment hosting. Right, let's clone the settings from the main app. Okay, and hit add. Now, if you see here over here, it says your 100% traffic is going to Tech Tutorials with Piyush, this domain, and your 0% traffic is going to Tech Tutorials with Piyush -staging, another domain. This domain, we haven't deployed anything on it yet. And on the production one, we already have something running. And let's go back to our pipeline. And now if you refresh it, you should see a staging slot over here, right? So now our app will be deployed on the staging slot. And package or folder, let's select the package folder. Okay, so drop, click OK. Runtime stack, will select the static one. Okay, and that's it. Hit save. Okay, let's give it a name, 𝗂𝗽𝗂𝗂𝗍. Save. Okay, go to all pipelines, 𝗂𝗽𝗂𝗂𝗍, and hit edit. Now we have our artifact stage created. We have the test deployment created. Now we'll also create one stage for production deployment. So you can click on add over here to create a stage. Or what you can do is you can clone the existing stage and make your changes. So let's do the cloning over here. Click clone. Okay, it says it created a new stage. Click on that. Now let's rename it to prod deployment. Cancel. Now go to pre-deployment conditions. And in this one, we'll add, so pre-deployment is test deployment is the pre-deployment. That means before triggering the prod deployment, the test deployment should have been completed already, right? And if you go down and if you see pre-deployment approvals over here, so you click on that and let's add myself as the approver because this is a prod deployment. We want some sort of a manual approval before it actually triggers the deployment, right? And this is the timeout. If someone does not approve it in 30 days, it will fail it. And there is an option that a user requesting a release or deployment should not approve it. That means if I am requesting it, I should not be the one to approve it, but we are just doing the demo test. So I'll just leave it blank, which is the default option. And that's it. Click cancel and then go to job. That's these details will be same. The only thing that we need to make here is change the staging slot to production slot, right? So rest everything. I'll just verify it. Everything it looks same. Click over here. Now you will see there is nothing called as production slot because this is the live environment. So to select that, you just have to uncheck this box. Okay, now it will deploy to your default production slot. So this is also good. Now hit save. Go back to the pipeline. Okay, so our pipeline looks good. Now let's open the build pipeline in a new tab. And this was the pipeline and hit edit. If you remember in the previous video, we added the deployment stage over here only in the build pipeline. And we don't want it because we want deployment to be triggered from the release pipeline now. Let's remove the entire deployment stage. It has two tasks. One is download artifacts, other one is deployment, and both will be taken care of release pipeline, but we have configured. So I'll just delete it. And now what it will do is it will just build the artifact from the main branch and it will publish the artifact in the drop container. Hit save. Now, if I save it because the continuous integration is already enabled, it should trigger the pipeline. Let's see. Okay. Save. Okay, let's go to pipelines. And it's already queued the pipeline to be triggered. So let's see this now. Build is running. Okay, so this job has been completed now. There are no errors and one artifact also produced. Now let's see if it triggered the release pipeline. Go to releases. And I see one release already over here. So click on that. Okay, so now it says it was able to pull the artifact. Now it is processing the gates. Click on logs. Okay, it is querying the work item. And if you see, it says query work item failed because we already have a blocking item. As per the query, if there is a work item with the status as P1 and if it is not in the done state, the deployment should not trigger. So which is what has happened over here. And it will evaluate the gate again in 4 minutes because the evaluation time between the gates was set as 5 minutes by default. You can change it as per your needs. So let me go to work item over here and change the status from doing to done. Hit save. So the query that we were using, let's go to the query, P1 task. Okay. And let's go to editor. So as per the query, if there is a priority item of one value. So we did not add the clause of the status of it, right? So ideally we should have. So let's add one more clause which says select a state and state should be done. And the operator we should use is this one, which means not equal to done. So if we do that, it should not pick any task in the query. So let's save this query. Okay, and now let's go to results. So there are no results at the moment. We go back and let's see if it evaluates that in next 4 minutes. We need to add one more permission so that your pipeline could access the work item. So for that, you can open the work item query in new tab. Okay, and select the query, the three dots in front of the query, and go to security. Now over here, you will see your user at the bottom, but this is not what we need. This already has the allow permission. What we need is you need to search your project. For me, it is YouTube clone, and search this particular user. YouTube clone build service and the name of your organization. This step is really important. Otherwise, your quality gates will fail. Right. So I'll select this one and make sure it has read permission set to allow. Okay. This is done. Now let's go back to the build pipeline and make some changes. And as soon as I save the pipeline, it should trigger the build and then followed by release pipeline. So let's go to our pipelines. So it already triggered the build pipeline. Let's click over here. And it's still in progress. It will take a couple of minutes and I'll just fast forward the video from here. Okay, so it has completed the build pipeline and it generated the artifact as well. Now let's have a look at the release pipeline. It should have generated a release as well. So here it is. And release is in progress. So it says the quality gate check has been succeeded because our P1 work item was closed already. Okay, so it evaluates the gate for consecutively 2 times, and once both are green, both are succeeded, it proceed further to do the deployment. So let's see the deployment steps. It is currently doing deployment to the staging environment. The details are over here. You can see the logs. So I'll pause the video here and let it finish. If you are getting value from this video, I would really appreciate if you gives it a thumbs up and subscribe the channel if you are new here. So in about 2 minutes, the deployment to staging environment has been completed, and let's quickly have a look at the link by going from here. And if you see, the URL is this one, and the URL has the keyword staging. So that means this is a different URL than our production environment, right? So this is the application that we have. And let's go back and see the next stage, which is prod deployment. So we are at our release over here. Let's go to pipeline. And now for the prod deployment, now it is asking our approval. When I approve it, only then it will proceed, else it will just wait for the approval because this is the deployment gate that we have added. I can approve it from here, or I should have received the email as well. Okay, so let me open my email. Okay, so this is the email that I've got. It says pre-deployment approval pending for this particular pipeline, for this release, and for this stage. Right, so pipeline, release, and then stage. This is how it is showing. And here is the view approval button. So I just have to click it. So let's click it. And it will redirect me to the page from where I have to approve it. So here is the approval button. Click approve. I can just say looks good to me and hit approve. Okay, it's approved. And go see the logs. It is also querying the work item. And let's quickly see what do we have in our app. So I'll just copy the URL from here, paste it over here, and remove the staging from it. Okay, so this is our prod version. It does not have anything deployed yet. And if you see, this is our staging version. We'll wait for it to finish and then I will show you the next steps. Okay, so after a few minutes, I see the pre-deployment approvals were completed, gates was completed, and then agent deployment was also completed in 1 minute 38 seconds. And if we go to our URL, this is our production URL, if you remember. So if I hit refresh now, it has the new version of application deployed, right? So this is our staging version and this is our production version, right? All right, so this is what we have done so far. Developer did the git checkout and made the changes in the local copy of their local branch. And then they pushed the code to Azure repos git with the help of a pull request, right? And which triggered the Azure DevOps CI pipeline. This pipeline has one build job, and what it is doing, it is getting the details from Azure repos git, all the files, including the pipeline code. Then it performed the steps in sequence, npm install, npm build, and then publish artifact. Once that is done, the job is completed. It triggered the release pipeline over here. And then release pipeline will get the artifacts from the build that was completed. It performs the quality gates check by querying the work item, and then it deployed it to stage with the help of Azure App Service slot. So this is the green slot. Now, after the approval, it deployed to production on the production slot. And this one over here is the blue slot, right? So now we have identical copy of your production site in prod and test as well. When you have to do the changes, you perform the changes in your test environment, let's say over here, and then you make a swap, right? Swap as in you swap the application DNS, and your application, your live application will be now pointing to the test version. So let's say here is your blue app, here is your green app. They both are identical at this time. Blue has version 1.0 and green has version 2.0, which is the updated version. So you make a swap, and then you made this as green and you made this as blue, right? So now your blue application is running on version 2.0, which is the latest production version. What is the benefit of doing it is, while the application deployment is in progress, there is no impact in the application availability. Your users will still be able to access through the older application version, and your application will be available by making a swap, right? So let's see how we can make the swap. So I'll go to my Azure portal over here. Okay, let's hit refresh over here first. Now you see both the applications are running, but the traffic is 100% directed to app 1. Now over here, there is a button that says swap. Click on that. And now you can make the changes over here, like source is this and target is this. Perform swap with preview. You can select this one, or you can directly make the swap. So let's disable this and hit swap. While it is making the changes, let's see if your app is still available. Both the apps are still available. Okay, after a few seconds, it says successfully completed swap between staging and prod. Let's close this. And now you see the traffic is still directed 100% to this, but the application has changed. So you should be able to see the changes if you had made any changes. Like I haven't made any changes to the application itself. That is why it is showing the same version on both the URLs. But please test it out by yourself and let me know if you face any issues. So this complete architecture we have completed, and we have completed the final step of making swap as well. And this is how we perform a blue-green deployment with the help of a CI/CD pipeline in Azure DevOps.